Awesome, thank you. Welcome everybody, good morning. My name is Brenna Walraven and I'm CEO of Corporate Sustainability Strategies. I'm a boutique consulting firm focused on leveraging the business case value proposition of sustainability. But first and foremost, I really want to thank Doug Bibby and Eileen Lee in particular, and the entire NHC leadership, not only for the opportunity for all of us to be here, but really for the idea to talk about sustainability innovation. Me and my colleagues are going to talk about where sustainability innovation, new technologies, new solutions, leverage kind of business case solutions, and we're going to talk first about what they're doing, a little bit about their company and things that they're working on. We're also going to talk about what didn't work and why. Lastly, we were going to say what's next, what's the future look like, and then we're going to open it up for some questions for all of you. So be thinking about, what's intriguing you, what you're interested in. I want to set a little context before I introduce our speakers, because sustainability innovation really is about innovative solutions that not only save money, of course we all want that, but they enhance resident, community, and employee engagement. They enhance brands, and they drive a bigger value proposition, kind of much like the program that we just saw the video on, same general concept. And these drive a more strategic business case approach for sustainability that not only, of course, helps environmental outcomes, but also can really drive better financial outcomes, fundamentally. What I also want to be clear about, this is not going to be a discussion about LEED, or leadership in energy and environmental design. LEED is a wonderfully successful, transformative certification process for the built environment. There's no doubt about that. But what we're really talking about is things like distributed energy models, renewable energies, the importance of access to natural light, the impact on open space and organic food to health and wellness, and where those intersect in a commercial real estate environment. With that, let me just introduce our panel. We have Louis Shotsky, who is head of sustainability, among other things, at Equity Residential. We, next to him, have Drew Torben, who actually was the former head of renewables at Prologis and now has his own firm, Black Bear Energy. And then we also have Kevin Verdi, who's the managing director of investments for National Real Estate Advisors. With that backdrop, let me turn it over first to Lou to tell us a little bit about Equity and what you're working on. And I'm going to let you take the slides.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Lou Shotsky, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the innovations in our sustainability program at Equity. I'll give a little context first. We are a REIT, and we own assets in 6 core markets, Boston, New York, DC, Seattle, San Francisco, and LA. We're fundamentally a long-term owner-operator, which tends to align nicely with sustainability. We tend to own a lot of high-rise, mid-rise assets located in dense urban environments. And so, for us, I think we think about all the different places sustainability can touch our business. I will talk about cool technology in a second. I think, the first thing I would say is, we think that a high-density, sustainable, low-carbon footprint lifestyle is inherently attractive to our core customer. And so, our assets have very high walk scores. We think that's important to attracting our customers, and things that we can do to enhance the message around that, enhance the customer experience around that, are kind of a core part of how we think about attracting people to our properties. When it comes to clean energy, we've done a lot of work over the last 5-6 years to embed clean energy into 71 of our assets. The chart up top will show you that mostly we do solar power on the West Coast, big surprise. This is a function of not just electricity prices in our markets, which tend to be really high, but also the type of asset. It's really hard to put a meaningful amount of solar power on the top of a high-rise. If you can tilt that building over on its side, all of a sudden it's a lot more attractive. So solar is certainly not the highest yielding energy investment that we make, but it is incredibly impactful at times. So I would say of 8 or 9 of our assets where we've deployed solar, the reduction in our net common area electric cost has been upwards of 80%. And so even if it's, it doesn't have like a 25 return like a lighting project, it's a double-digit return, and even if you just ran that deal for a year and sold it, you're absolutely going to get paid. So solar is a big impact, lower yield. The kind of unexpected benefit of solar, both solar PV where you're making electricity and solar thermal, which we use more for heating pools, also a little bit for heating hot water in the apartments, is some people just get really jazzed up about the fact that there's solar panels on the roof of their property. I can't explain it. I love these projects. It's part of how I make my living, and I don't think I would be that excited about it, but there is a meaningful segment of people who get excited about it and will talk about it and promote your property for that reason. The other unintended benefit, we underwrote solar thermal for pools, and we thought, oh great, we'll get a nice return, is in a lot of parts of California, we now keep our pools open longer because we effectively can heat them for free. And so, there's a very small set of customers who just love to go swimming in the pool, even if it's really cold out. So I've been kind of perpetually surprised that there always seems to be some level of customer benefit that is nowhere in the underwriting that comes to fruition. So we did a particularly interesting project 3 years ago now, here in San Diego at an asset called Market Street Village. It's called our S4 project. It was in partnership with Sharp Labs. We were buying solar panels for Sharp, and they came to us and they said, we want to test out a microgrid concept for an apartment building. Could we do, they called it a mini microgrid, which I thought was a bit much, but it's a very interesting project, and what I like about it is that each of the individual components pencils on its own, and then when you put the whole system together and wrap it with this algorithm that they were developing at the time, have developed now, it actually adds more value. So the 3 or 4 components of the system are, there are smart thermostats and sensors in the building that are connected to the cloud. They know, they have a weather forecast from NOAA, and we can set back those thermostats, reduce our energy load at any moment in time. We have solar panels on the roof generating electricity. We have battery storage in the basement. And all 3 of these pieces have the same objective in San Diego, which is to reduce our demand charges. So in our portfolio, San Diego has the highest demand charges of anywhere in our portfolio. And so if you can reduce the kind of peak energy usage for the month, it's going to save you a disproportionate amount on your electric bill. And it's a thing that kind of when you look at the math, it doesn't seem like it's going to work. And then you actually do all the math, and it has a real impact. So what this system does is it ties in all these components, and every sort of 15 minutes it's calculating, how can I best use this battery power? What can I set back to keep that peak demand for my property as low as possible? When we did this, the batteries were very expensive. Today they're a little bit cheaper, but this kind of package is probably pretty close to coming to market. The challenge that happens is we usually do these as a capital project. We buy all the technology, install it ourselves, and run it, and batteries have kind of taken a turn, at least the stuff that we've seen in the apartment industry, where you may pay for it, but what you really need is a perpetual O&M agreement to keep that battery running. You don't want to go through a big capital cost at year 7 or 10 or whatever to replace the batteries. And so the ability to integrate the battery and run it the way that you want to run it for your property, as opposed to the way that vendor may choose to run it, is a little bit of an impediment, but I think people will come around.
Well, when demand charges can be, 50 or 60% of your total energy cost, particularly in the state of California.
Yeah, that'll juice your return.
I mean, that can juice your returns, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then cogeneration is something that we've done a lot of. It's particularly good in buildings where you have central domestic hot water. It's exceptionally good in buildings where you have hydronic heating, space heating for the building. So the way the cogen works is you're combining 2 previously separate systems. On the top is our kind of without cogen system architecture. You You buy gas from the utility, you run it in the boiler, you make hot water, you pump it around your building, and then you use electricity for all manner of things. What a cogen does, in our case, we use what's effectively a big truck engine that runs off of natural gas. It spins a turbine and makes electricity, but all of the return hot water comes through and gets preheated through a heat exchanger, such that you effectively run your boiler probably 90% less than you would have previously. And so these projects have very good returns, but you have to have scale, and you have to have probably 200, 225 units on the scale side, and you need to have one central loop that you can kind of tie everything into. We love this stuff so much, we build it into our new buildings now. On the left is a deal that we built in New York, leased up last year, and this has been a huge part of our ability to, there's only so much lighting that you can do.
Yeah.
There's only so much BMS you can do, and so when you can make your own energy on site, you can really move the meter on the energy line. And then the last thing I was going to mention was lighting. This is a very big part of our capital program around sustainability. And so the picture on the left this is a garage in Boston next to the Boston Garden, and it had these metal halide lamps running right down the middle. And we could have replaced those one for one with LEDs, and we would have gotten a really nice return. We actually increased the number of fixtures in that garage by about 40%. And you can see the results in terms of the distribution of light on the right side. It feels a whole lot safer.
Safer, right. Important for residents.
Yeah, it's important. And this is a garage. This is actually not just resident parking. This is a garage where people choose to park, and they have options, although they're disappearing quickly, which we obviously like. And so there's just all sorts of components around LED where I would just say you have to be careful and think through, what's the color of the light? What's the color rendering index of the light? CRI is a term you'll hear in the lighting industry. It has to do with, if you've ever changed a light bulb from fluorescent to LED and all of a sudden the paint looks different, that's because you're probably seeing the true color for the first time. The spectrum that you can see through fluorescent is sometimes fairly constrained. So there's just a lot of pieces to a lighting project where, beyond just sort of saving some energy, that you can use to dramatically improve the attractiveness of your asset.
Absolutely. Excellent. Kevin, you want to talk a little bit about what National Real Estate Advisors is doing?
Sure. So just to give you a little background on our company so you understand kind of what we're up to. We're not primarily a multifamily builder, although about over 40% of our portfolio is multifamily. We are an SEC-registered investment advisor. We have net assets of almost $3 billion under management. It translates into slightly more than $6 billion of real estate throughout the country. I think similar to Lou, we are concentrated in the primary markets. We have, I think, 80% of our portfolio is in the core markets. We invest in all food groups, but again, a lion's share of our portfolio is multifamily. Our platform is a build-to-core platform. Our investors are primarily pension funds from the Taft-Hartley world, and we want to build our projects. Every asset we own in our portfolio, we actually built from the ground up. We don't go out and acquire existing assets. So from that perspective, we can look at this from the beginning of the development cycle and try to get out in front of some of the issues that Lou was discussing, and look at sustainability holistically across our projects. I won't give you the boring history of our company, but again, this just shows sort of the markets we're in, and I'd say we're in some secondary markets as well, but a majority of our portfolio lies in the big major urban centers. We have a pretty strong internal commitment to sustainability. I think it's become not really a want to anymore, it's really a have to. Investors that we promote ourselves to try to invest money on their behalf, it's not even a question anymore. If you're not doing sustainability things or wellness type initiatives, you're not going to check the box for them to be able to invest with you. So it's really become critical. So the first, I'll just throw up a couple of examples of projects we're working on that are we're trying to improve communities. We're trying to make great places to live, work, play. I know that phrase gets overused a bit, but really we're competing in a hyper-competitive market. And in order to get, if you're building new apartment product, your rents are probably pretty high because construction costs are high. And if you're not providing a living environment that's more than just a small apartment unit, it has to have an experience with it. You're not going to compete as well. The BLOC is a project we've worked on. We've just completed construction. It was an acquisition that we completely renovated. It's a couple of different uses. There's a hotel with 450 rooms that's a Sheraton Grand. We partnered with Delos there and did some wellness rooms there. Delos does some work with respect to happiness and well-being and stress levels and different scents and colors and lighting and that sort of stuff that we've put in a few floors in the hotel to see if there's an economic benefit for doing these things to make the experience a little bit more enjoyable. One of the biggest things we did here was there's a 500,000 feet of retail that was completely enclosed, and we removed the roof and created an urban plaza, an urban oasis, really, if you will, where we're programming on a weekly basis different things on the plaza that have been really beneficial to attracting office tenants to the office tower. We're 50% leased on the office building. It's an 800,000-foot office building. So obviously, LA is not exactly the most dynamic office market. We felt like we needed something extra there. And so we have yoga classes out on the plaza. We've done a fashion show. We're going to have a car event with Tesla. Things to sort of activate the project and the property and just really bring the community into the asset as opposed to blocking the community out before when it was enclosed. So we've been fairly successful there. The hotel is doing tremendous. We've been 90% occupied since we reopened after renovating. And the hotel lease up, we've leased over 100,000 feet. I think the prior slide said something about in the last year, with a market that has 18% vacancy, we leased 127,000 square feet and at 10% above what we pro-formed. So we really feel like the place that we made there really created the opportunity there for us. So it had an economic benefit. Another big mixed-use project we're working on right now is under construction in Philadelphia, a city block in Center City, Philadelphia. This project is interesting in that we're building 500 apartment units on top of about 100,000 feet of street-level retail. We've included a couple of micro-turbines in the project, which are generating electricity for the apartment tower, as well as hot water, similar to Lou's cogen plants. We're providing hot water to the residents and also heating the pool water, which is, as you can imagine, in Philadelphia, it's not a very long pool season. But we're going to extend it by being able to warm the water with the micro-turbines. We've also done some street-level things to make it more of a walkable environment. We've widened sidewalks, add bicycle hubs, stations, all that sort of stuff to just make it a place where people want to come and hang out and have dinner or live and just really improve the overall environment in the city. One Congress, very similar to those other two projects. We're about to break ground on a 450-unit luxury apartment tower there. One Congress we bought was a 2,300 space garage. It really separated 5 pretty historic neighborhoods. The north, for people that are familiar with Boston, you get the North End, Bullfinch Triangle, the West End, the Financial District. The garage building sat on 4 acres and straddled Congress Street, and it really divided the city into two. Our program is going to basically reuse half the garage, which is going to save a ton of concrete and waste that would have resulted from the demolition of that building. But we're going to break up the garage so that we reconnect the city streets and sight lines and open up the city again. We tried to do a cogen plant there, but we had a lot of issues with the utilities there, and we were unable to get the approval to do that. It's 2.3 million square feet of density approved there. It was perfect size for a very efficient cogen plant, but unfortunately we weren't able to do that there. Journal Squared, I think, is probably interesting for the group in that this is just a straight-up multifamily tower that sits on top of a PATH station. I guess I should have mentioned all of our projects tend to be transit-oriented. We really believe that being next to a transit hub is very important. Our firm believes wholeheartedly that car usage is declining and will continue to decline, and that people are gravitating towards places where they can have experiences and spend their money elsewhere. It's not cheap to own a car, and if you want to live in an urban environment and pay for very expensive rents, being on top of mass transit is very important. Journal Square is unique in that Jersey City, for those of you that don't know, is across the river from Manhattan. It has probably the most spectacular views of Manhattan, but its rents are about half of Manhattan rents. So it has a lot of people that may work in back office jobs in Manhattan or even in New Jersey, but can't really afford the Manhattan rents. But it's a very relatively easy commute into Manhattan. Because the rents are so much lower in Jersey City than they are in Manhattan, construction costs really aren't much different. Most developers build apartment towers on the river with PTAC units. The PTAC units, basically is that hole in the wall under the window in the hotel where the unit kicks on in the middle of the night and wakes you up. Yeah. When you're on the 40th floor of an apartment tower on the river in Jersey City, the wind can come whipping through that thing and it whistles and it's really not very efficient. We have another building closer to the water that we built 15 years ago, and the utility bills for an 800 square foot apartment unit can be $500 or $600 a month. Wow. When we designed the first tower here at Journal Square, we decided, no way are we doing PTACs. It's a 52-story tower.
Much more expensive, right? Can you talk
Much more expensive. It cost us about $20,000 a unit, so it was about a $10 million bill to do a two-pipe system. But we have a closed envelope. The living environment inside is much better. We believe, and we open the building next month to residents. We believe we're going to get a premium to the market because the living experience is going to be dramatically better, and the utility costs are going to be dramatically lower. So
business case.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's cheaper for the resident, but it's also going to be better for the resident.
Yeah.
They're going to be more comfortable.
Yeah,
so
I think the turnover is going to be lower. I think we're going to have better
Yeah.
retention, and I think we're going to get better rents. It's just going to be a more comfortable unit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it still has spectacular views. When you're on the 50th story here, you feel like you're on the top of the world. And then something kind of a little off the beaten path. We're looking at the Navy Yard in Philly has a huge high-pressure gas line that runs through it because they used to build ships back there during World War II. Most of our investors, I should have explained, come from the electrical community, electrical worker community, and they've got the ear of some of the local politicians to secure that gas to create a power plant. And we are looking at maybe building the natural gas power plant and owning it, and also selling that power to a data center that would also sit next to the power plant. So it would be very efficient power usage. Natural gas is a tremendously clean energy. Data centers are energy hogs, so that would be tremendous. And then we're looking on top of that to throw a vertical greenhouse, which would take all the CO2 that's generated from the power plant and absorb that through the growing process of a vertical farm. It's kind of out there, but I just thought that was a good illustration to show since our firm is really kind of looking towards the future and ways to be much more efficient with the way we use resources.
Excellent.
Nope, and I missed that slide.
That's what it looks like, right? Go back so they can see what it looks like.
Yeah, so that would be your vertical farm. The interesting thing about the vertical farm, and there are several of them that have been built now. There's a few in North Carolina that we've looked at, and a bunch have been done in Europe. Your typical farm, you can get 1 or 2 or 3 crops a year. In a vertical farm, you can get 20 or 30 crops a year. And so, the production and efficiency is amazing. These are basically just these trays that they put, they just spray mist at with nutrients and pump in CO2 into these basically saran wrap bags that the plants grow in, and they're able to just be extremely productive.
So East Coast could have fresh vegetables, organic fresh vegetables, within hours versus coming from out here in California, which is
tomatoes, lettuce, I mean, all kinds of vegetables. You can grow just about anything. Certain things grow better in the vertical farm, so we're still sort of learning about that. That was one part of the development we would probably not own. We would want to sort of lease to a vertical farmer, but certainly their biggest cost of operation is, believe it or not, buying CO2. So having a gas-fired plant next to them that's just kicking it out would be tremendously efficient.
Perfect. Okay, Drew, you're up. Excellent.
Good morning, pleasure to be with everybody. Drew Torben with Black Bear Energy, and we are an owner's representative specific to renewable energy and clean tech. So we're working primarily with institutional property owners of all property types to help them procure renewables and clean tech. And this slide summarizes it best, in my opinion. This was, for the long time, dealing with your utility, you had a choice. As a ratepayer, is what they called you. You could pay your bill or you could not pay your bill, was kind of the choice. And as of late, that has shifted. You're no longer a ratepayer. You're now a customer. Ooh. You have choice. So you're enlightened to some degree, but perhaps not empowered to make the most of that choice, because these are new choices for us. And if you've managed a property, there's a lot of choices out there, which is great because there's a lot of opportunity. What we help is our customers take advantage of that opportunity. So we're supplier agnostic. We put everything through a competitive tender. As Brenna mentioned, myself and actually two of my colleagues came from Prologis, where we led their renewable energy effort. About half of the other team came from Walmart, where they led their renewable energy effort. A little bit about us. We're 2 years old. Just completed our Series A round this past summer. About 24 clients, two of which are not REITs or some other institutional form of property owner. The others all are. And again, every asset type, industrial, definitely multifamily, office, healthcare, hospitality, you name it, combined about 2.5 billion square feet in their portfolios. And we concentrate on 4 technologies: solar, energy storage, LED lighting, and fuel cells. And as I mentioned, we put everything through a competitive tender. We believe in best of breed, and on average, we run 1 RFP a week. So that volume really helps us and collectively helps our clients, because we do see so much transactional volume come through the platform. A typical solar project has this structure. The landlord is up top in orange, and you're really purchasing the energy. In some cases, you're just leasing the space. So the green and the orange circles in some cases are combined, in some cases they're separate. But at the heart of it, really the decision you want to make is, how do you want to extract value from the project? So I think a lot of people approach a solar project saying, well, I'm going to reduce my operating expenses. And that's absolutely true. You can do that if that's what you want to achieve, but you can also increase rent. You can do a number of different things. There's basically an amount of value that's created, and you can channel that in a number of different ways. So this is the typical project structure. You add dotted lines, you cross over different things. There's a lot of value that can be created, though, as long as you are clear about what it is you want to achieve. A quick case study on one of our projects with LBA Realty, which is right up the road. They're in Irvine at Park Place, if anybody knows that complex. It's an energy storage project. So LBA Realty there has quite a bit of load, if you're familiar, several office towers. And what they're doing is peak demand reduction, which some of the other panelists talked about here as well. But really, with energy storage, a lot of times people think you're storing the energy over the course of the night and you're discharging it during the day. It's actually much more active than that. So energy storage, the batteries are looking for peaks in your usage during the day, and then the battery is discharging to reduce that peak demand and therefore reduce your demand charge on your bill. This particular project is 1.3 megawatts, 2.5 megawatt hours, so it's a 2-hour system. It's the largest indoor energy storage project in the US. LBA is a fantastic client, and you can see the numbers there. The way that these work is that they're making a payment of about $23,000 annually to the service provider. So there's no CapEx required from LBA. They're not paying anything out of pocket. There's a third party that owns that battery that they pay $23,000 a year to. The third party, STEM, who owns the battery, STEM is guaranteeing them $69,000 of savings. So at the end of the year, if they haven't at least hit that threshold, they're going to write a check back to LBA. And then there's an estimated savings of just over $91,000 that they think is certainly possible, but contractually not guaranteed. So STEM just turned that project on. It's operational now, and everybody's happy. LBA is saving money. STEM owns and operates the project. That's a 10-year contract, by the way. Typically, they're cancelable after 5. So it's not as long-term as a solar contract. I don't have a picture of it, but it sits in the electrical room, fairly benign piece of equipment. Doesn't take a long time to install. So these are great projects.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we're done with the sides. We're going to break up with the sides. So great overviews, gentlemen. Appreciate that. What I'd like to understand is each of you, if you wouldn't mind, I'll probably start with you, Lou. Talk to us about something that didn't work, something that you either looked at and didn't do, or you did and wouldn't repeat, or just something that didn't work. Help our audience learn from you guys kind of being on the forefront if there's some things that didn't work, or at least complicators.
Yeah. I can think of 2 or 3 that didn't work. One was the project I showed already. You know, the battery technology was not there yet, and we're looking at it again. Maybe you'll help us look at that. Sure. But I think, you know, that will come. We were just too early. Another thing that has worked not as well as I had hoped is, and it was a question I was going to ask you when I was looking at that, is doing solar on new construction is a little tricky. We've had a lot of luck in terms of, you know, the returns that we underwrite on these projects are pretty much the returns we get. They may be a little bit more volatile, but they're there. And what I didn't realize was a lot of that is just a function that you have this huge baseline of what your existing energy use is.
So you have data to tell how it's going to perform.
So we probably undersized one of our projects a little bit, and we might have oversized one just a little bit. You know, I wouldn't call it a failure, but it's something that we need to get better at. I think those are kind of the 2 big. The third one that I might mention is, and this is maybe a little bit particular to us, but because we're a REIT, we can't take advantage of certain tax incentives, and we
can't monetize the tax credits.
Yeah, we incurred a bit of brain damage on that without any great result. It worked once, or actually it worked 3 times, and then it didn't work more recently, and I think there's an innovation waiting to come to market there on that.
Interesting. Kevin, maybe talk to us a little bit, because I know you mentioned it a little bit in your overview, you know, where the utilities weren't necessarily cooperating, or give us some further context.
Yeah, I think there are 2 projects I think I would talk about specifically where we've struggled. The one in Boston in particular, it's set up perfectly for a cogen plant. And it's hugely dense. There's just going to be a ton of power drawn, but the utility there is you know, they're just a political animal, and they're very bureaucratic. And, you know, we have investors, and as much as we want to do good, we need to move projects forward, and we just could not get them to react in a time frame that would have made sense for the project. So that was very frustrating.
Was it more that they were being bureaucratic, or was it an issue of standby rates, or both of those things, or?
You know, it's hard to really say exactly what the issues were, but I think they just didn't want competition.
Yeah.
I think that the utility model is probably under attack from a lot of different areas.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the competition is not really favorable for them. So, right. In the end, it was better for their business model if they didn't have to compete with a cogen plant. They'd rather that, you know, 2.5 million square feet of density draw off their grid. Right. The second thing I'd say is, you know, technology is moving very rapidly. You know, this battery storage capabilities is light years ahead of where it was even a few years ago. But to us, it's frustrating that the technology around solar hasn't progressed more quickly. Yeah. We bought a building in Lower Manhattan that we reskinned and looked at. They actually now have glass panels that you can see right through that are photovoltaic, and you can generate power by just a window in your apartment unit. but it just it did not come close to penciling. And it would have been a perfect project. You know, a lot of buildings are going all glass.
Yep.
It's kind of a waste to not be able to harness some of that when you're putting a glass panel up anyway. So that's been a little frustrating, but really I think that technology will come, and I think, you know, the next round of technology is going to be pretty exciting.
Excellent. Drew, anything that you've come across, either with Blackboard, Prologis, or both, that didn't work or didn't work on behalf of your clients?
Usually when a project doesn't go through, from our perspective, it's because of a lack of communication. It hits somebody's desk that didn't realize it was requiring a certain element that is at odds with whatever they're able to approve, whatever the property can accommodate. Sometimes that's accounting-based, sometimes that's property-specific. So, you know, everything from a property being on a disposition list that people didn't realize to, oh, we're going to redevelop the garage in 3 years, to, wait a minute, we can't sign that contract because of this term. So we really tried to get everybody in the room and ask those questions at the beginning early. And there is, I think, unfortunately, especially with clean tech and renewables, there's a lot of misinformation out there based on the vendors that have already called on these companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what's next, guys? What are we, and I may start with you, Kevin, if you don't mind, pick on you a little bit. I just know in my experience in clients that I'm dealing with that this kind of nexus of food, health, wellness, and real estate is just coming up more and more. Not only the Harvard study that tied and connected indoor air quality to improve cognition, which is increasingly going to be of interest to not only employees, but residents and others, but also this access to a fresh, organic food, wanting it right on their patio. And you guys have looked at this a couple different ways. What is next? What are you guys thinking about?
I mean, I think that's the direction that we've been heading, and I think it's going to continue to go that way. The units get smaller and smaller every year, right? Because construction costs are out of sight, and you're trying to be most efficient with your space and your money. If somebody doesn't want to spend a ton of time in a 500 square foot unit. So you've got to create an environment, an amenity-rich environment where they can go and feel like they have a place and they feel like it's home. A lot of our projects now, we're looking at more than 300 units plus just to be able to deliver the right amenity package, because you've got to absorb a lot of amenity space in the underwriting. We're oversizing all of our amenities. We're competing in some of the toughest markets, and we feel like if somebody's going to come and pay an extraordinary amount for a very small unit, you should be providing something that they feel like they're getting value for their money. And that includes, dining options and organic movements and feeling like you're, the millennial generation, they want to feel like there's a cool factor,
yeah,
right? And we develop everything we own, so, not only are we looking a couple years out, but our buildings aren't built for a couple of years, so we're really looking 5-7 years out, and what do we need in these projects to be competitive then? So it's, we're really trying to be forward-thinking about creating an environment around the entire project that really attracts people, not just focused on, a bedroom here, a bathroom there.
Well, which is part of the TOD, or transportation orientation, because that allows people to give up their car and the cost of a car and be more walkable, which is healthier, but also be able to get to work and get around. So
right, and we're doing things like urban gardens on
Yeah.
rooftops. Those are huge hits. People love to be able to grow something in their building.
Yeah.
Dog parks are an absolute necessity, and dealing with the waste of the dogs is
fun.
Really complicated. So there's a lot of things that you need to think about to deliver, to be able to compete in the market, I think.
Excellent. So Lou, what's going on? What's next? What are you guys thinking about?
I think, if I look kind of 2-3 years ahead, there's a whole new sort of category of building technology coming in around building management systems, or I should say a different technology coming in. Those have been traditionally dominated.
The Internet of Things type technologies.
Yeah, I don't really like that term.
I know. I knew you wouldn't.
Because I don't think it has to. It's sensors, right? It's
Right.
the low-cost sensors, and then the networks in these buildings that can deliver that information in a cost-effective way. I think Wi-Fi-ing your building from top to bottom. If you can afford that for some individual reason, you're probably luckier than I am. And so I think there's something new is going to happen around networking of these sensors across your buildings that's going to make the business case that all of these different little Internet of Things companies have work for everything. And there's some cool stuff happening in San Francisco, some companies working on that, and then also in New York. And so we're kind of keeping our eyes on that. And I think there'll just be more information available to run your building better.
But is that sensing, are you talking about not just sensing things like humidity and temperature and occupancy to deploy light, heating, cooling, but also things like indoor air quality,
Yeah, or I met a company 2 weeks ago, and they sell a product that it's a leak detector, basically. And you can wrap it around pipe. You can put it, I don't know if you've ever owned a building and your P-TAC blew up and you had to replace the floors in your apartment. That's like not a super fun thing to spend money on. And if I could put a $10 sensor underneath that P-TAC, and when it went off, I could go into that unit
10 minutes.
and save the flooring. I could buy a lot of $10 sensors. But I think it's all about the price point of the individual sensor and then having this network that it doesn't have to be high bandwidth network, but it has to be sort of always available. And so that company actually uses a low frequency radio network in the building, which is better for penetrating, large concrete buildings and things like that. And I think that could really change. It would allow a lot of these sensors and devices to proactively notify us of things like a water leak.
That's great. Well, with that, I think we're in perfect timing to see if the audience has any questions for us. And I see a hand right now. You are the winner. Go ahead, stand up. Don't be afraid. A man's coming to you with a microphone soon.
You guys have been talking a lot about energy and consumption and things of that nature. Are your companies looking at other building systems with mass timber construction, engineered wood products like CLT, things of that nature? Because, steel and concrete buildings take a tremendous amount of energy just to manufacture the glass and the steel and the concrete versus renewable wood products, which probably a lot of people in this room build wood frame, but the codes haven't got up to it yet, so I understand there's that part of it, but in Canada and Europe, they are building, 20-plus story buildings out of engineered wood products. So my question to you is, has your companies or you guys been tasked at looking at that sustainability piece of the formula?
Good question. Are you guys?
No, we have not. We do primarily high-rise. I think we maybe have, I can count on one hand the number of stick-built projects we've built. Most of our projects are north of 15, 20 stories. In some cases, they go up as high as 75 stories. So we really have not. For us, I don't know if the cost competitiveness is there yet. I think you lose a lot of efficiencies because of the amount of the size of the beams and the structural integrity. And certainly in places like San Francisco, I couldn't imagine building a 20-story stick-built building. So we haven't really looked at that. Most of our projects are concrete or steel. I would say 80% of them are probably concrete.
Makes sense.
Yeah, a couple different places where that came up. I would say I haven't been tasked with looking at that, but I think there is some legitimate potential opportunity. Two things. One, there was a company from France, the name escapes me. It might have been called BLOC. And what they did was it's a panelized construction system. And so you design your building in CAD, and then they have the
Excuse me.
basically all of, basically a wall assembly pre-made in wood. It's cut out for the windows. And the benefit of the product, although it was made of wood, was really that, their value proposition was you can build your building faster and off-site with cheaper labor, which I thought was really interesting. And then I did talk to two timber REITs about, they claim, which obviously I don't know why they would claim anything else, but they claim that you can build a 20-story timber building, and it's obviously a different construction type than your garden or your stick-over podium type construction. But I do think that we'll look at that again. My perception, having talked to some of our construction guys, was that it was certainly something that was pretty far out in the future.
Good question, though. Only other thing I would add, and it's not about stick construction, but it's more about what's happening with skins. Not only that solar is on the rise, but companies like View Glass, which essentially the glass adjusts to the level of light load on it so that you don't have to have any window treatment and you get full darkness when the sun's blaring, but you can see perfectly out. It's cool to the touch. It has a dramatically positive impact in terms of energy consumption without obstructing views. And in new construction, it's within about 5% of cost because you don't have to do window treatments and in terms of the price point. So that is something that we're seeing that will help change it. There's another question. Say your name and who you are.
Hi, Nyla Westlake with TCR. What's been your experience with VRF systems, and do you think it's been proven out yet, and what's the appropriate application for multifamily?
So that's variable refrigerant systems, right? Make sure. Have you guys, any of you used them?
No.
So I think it's very context dependent for us. We've used them in a few jobs. The benefit that typically gets touted of VRF is that you can heat and cool simultaneously. So if you have a building where you happen to need to do that, that is a benefit. We used it on a couple of projects where it provided, the reason we used it was because we were sort of in between a rock and a hard place in terms of, there were some constraints on providing heating and cooling to some units as well as an adjacent common area. And so we used it because it can kind of provide both independently. I mean, it's one unit, but you can provide it, you can have different demands in the different areas. So for us, it was sort of on an exception basis. I don't know anything about sort of functional issues with the technology, or I haven't heard sort of VRF horror stories.
Well, the only thing that I would say are certainly not an expert in VRF, but is that particularly where you're doing large-scale renovation, particularly in older buildings, for example, it can be very small. Easy to install in an existing building that might be older, where you don't have this ability to run these huge ducts.
Yeah.
So there's some benefit to that in terms of being able to renovate and get good HVAC services. Great question. Another question?
Spencer Stewart with Legacy Partners.
Welcome, Spencer.
With the advent of Lyft and Uber and all the ride sharing, are you rethinking all your parking garages? And also, what about the pickup and drop-off lanes for that to happen more efficiently? Are you guys thinking about that, and what are your thoughts?
Kevin, would you mind? Because I know you guys have looked at this very heavily.
I have a big opinion about this. We are actively, I don't want to say attacking municipalities, but dramatically trying to reduce our parking requirements in all of our new projects. Parking is extremely expensive. We're finding less and less usage in the parking garages that we build. I think in the future with, like you mentioned, Uber and Lyft, but I think with driverless cars coming, with car sharing services, bike hub stations, this whole transit-oriented lifestyle, we are strong believers that, especially in the urban cores, that parking is outdated. I think zoning officials and zoning requirements should be dramatically reduced at this point. We have new apartment projects where we were required to build a certain amount of parking, and it's not cheap to build structured parking, we all know. And we get about 35–40% usage from our residents. People just aren't showing up with cars anymore. And I think that trend continues. I think it probably gets worse. So the less we can build, the better off I think we are.
And that's not just about autonomous cars, and not even just about Uber and Lyft, but even the major car manufacturers going into a shared service type solution for cars. BMW in South America, you can lease access to a car for X amount of period of time. You don't maintain it, you don't park it, but you get the use that matches up with it. When you want a car to go on a trip, you have it, and it's not just a rental car, it's
you have a license to it, sure. Yeah, and building parking is not a value-add proposition. You're not making money on those parking spaces. So it's really a waste of resources, and it's a waste of money.
What about you guys? Are you looking at that?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely converted a number of garages from entirely resident to, you know, public as well, and a lot of our locations lend themselves to that. I think my personal opinion is there's people doing some goofy stuff with like Audi and some other people trying to figure out how to get your car to automatically go park itself, and that, you know, you'll be able to park 2.3 cars per existing parking space today. We're kind of taking a wait and see on that. I mean, look, if we don't have any cars to go in the garages, we can furnish amenity spaces. If not, we can rent storage space. I mean, we're going to find alternative uses for the space.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably on the less aggressive end of that.
Really good question.
Good morning. I wanted to ask about value add technologies.
Sure.
I'm in the Lexington, Kentucky market. My name is Ken Silvestri. We broker a lot of value add apartments. And we've had a lot of success with companies coming in and putting sensors on all the water so that the tenant, the resident, gets to pay for 100% of the water bill, and making sure also that it finds all the leaks that are happening so that, you know, in the morning you get a report and all that's fixed. And then boiler chillers from some of these 70s and 80s products, they're putting sensors on the motors. The tenant begins to pay for all the utilities. So I wonder what technologies you're seeing that would be more for the value add apartment owner.
So I haven't had as much experience with the water that you mentioned, but I think value add can be in terms of a technology, or it can be in terms of a project structure. So we do a lot of projects where there's not an OpEx savings, so you're paying the same amount that you would otherwise for electricity, and all of the savings that would have gone under the bill is channeled back to the property in the form of rent. So it's very quantifiable, easily identifiable, cappable perhaps at the time of sale, rental stream. And you can certainly do that with solar. We've done it with energy storage, although less so. So I guess what I'd say is we're looking at it both from a technology standpoint, but also contractually, how to do that.
Right, because in those solutions, there's no capital outlay.
Right.
Right, and if you're structured as a lease, because I know in Prologis, we talked about this, looked at that. You don't get into the bad income issues with REITs. But there are ways, you're just renting your roof out for solar, and you get a rent, you make sure that you protect, you know, structural issues, leak issues. Tenant wants to add a satellite dish issues, but you blow and go.
We're doing some projects now where the property owner is getting carports installed for free, and on top of that, they're getting rent for renting the parking lot.
So that's another value add. But since you're just looking at these water sensors, are you doing any solution that I think it was Ken mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think for value add, one of the things that other segments of real estate that have been able to do that we haven't figured out, we tried to do it in California, and there was like an army of lawyers who showed up, was
Shocking, I know.
Was sell solar energy back to our residents. I mentioned that we might have slightly overbuilt one of our arrays, and so we thought, well, great, we'll just tie this to an apartment, and then, you know, we can sell solar, and it was just like a complete non-starter. So I think, you know, for value add, any of these conservation projects, you know, once it flows through your financials, I mean, we had a couple solar deals that we sold. It wasn't even on the books for, you know, it wasn't generating for 12 months, and we feel like it was fully valued in the transaction.
Yeah.
So I think anything that is going to conserve energy or water that flows to your bottom line is a value add addition. I think if you're talking about in the units, it's obviously very dependent on, you know, who's paying for what. Right. So I mean, that would be my general thinking about that is, if it pencils, it pencils.
And last point is, I think you told me as well, Drew, that when, in your experience, you've seen those solar projects that are just a lease underwritten at the underlying real estate value cap rate. So it's not a different underwriting criteria for that lease than any other lease than you have in the real estate.
Correct. I mean, you could even argue perhaps there should be a lower cap rate because these are 20-year leases with no vacancy.
Right. Very stable.
Well, and no depreciation.
Okay.
No loss.
One last question? One
Yeah.
last question?
Oh, great. Right back
Doug
here?
says no on the question.
Oh, cool.
One last?
Last one. Chris Moreno with Luxor One Package Solutions. I had a question about, I was actually out in Washington, D.C. I have 4 younger sisters who are millennials. And we were doing a property walk because she's renting an apartment out there. We went by the garbage, and as we're talking about sustainability, and the garbage was overflowing. Not one of your properties, don't worry. But the garbage was overflowing. There was a composting area. There was cardboard all over the place. And she was like, wow, this smells really bad. I wanted to, and that was an emotional issue. I wanted to kind of get your take as you have different requirements from city, county, state,
Like San Francisco,
San Francisco, exactly.
San Francisco.
How are you handling these differences within your portfolios? Are you trying to mandate it nationwide? Are you, trying to take it case by case? And then what kind of systems are you trying, are you seeing an ROI by using an outsourced company or doing it internally?
You want to try it, Lou?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Certainly when we're developing, I think there's always a big groan in the room when I ask for 3 chutes for trash, recycling, and composting, but the alternative is really
Ugly.
either stinky or expensive. So I think there's that. There's also an issue of there's just lots of different municipalities with lots of different types of service. In some of our properties, people come and pick through the recycling, and then we get fined for what was trash that was in the recycling or vice versa, and then they want to tell us what resident it is, and we're kind of making a business decision about what's the right thing to do with that. It's highly variable in terms of what you're going to do, and it's also highly dependent on the type of product that you have. I can imagine, I've never been in a high-rise where the trash was overflowing out of the chute, but I can imagine just about every garden property in the world, if you didn't have a little overflow once in a while, you're probably hugely overpaying for your trash service. So it's a messy balance, it always is.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.